Hey, stop! Little girl, stop! Look, I need to borrow your hoverboard. Where is he? Here. There! He's on a hoverboard! The board! Get it, board! Get him!
Yeah, we got him!
Something very familiar about all this.
You bojo! The bus don't work on water!
Unless you've got power!
What is gravity?
You have no idea. Okay, next question.
Wow.
No, here's the difference. We can describe gravity. We can say what it does to other things. Gravity. We can say what it does to other things. We can measure it, predict with it. But when you start asking, like, what it is, I don't know. I don't know.
So did I accidentally ask a deeper question than I meant to?
Yeah, no, you were meant to ask deep questions.
Apparently I was.
In life. So to say, what is it? I think Einstein, in an Einsteinian answer, we would say gravity is the curvature of space and time. And objects will follow the curvature of space-time, and we interpret that as a force of gravity. That's probably the best answer I can give to a what is gravity question. That's probably the best answer I can give to a what is gravity question, or why is there gravity. That's the best I can do there. I think that's a good start. And I can also say that Einstein noted that matter tells space how to curve. Space tells matter how to move.
Say that again.
Isn't that beautiful?
It is. No, I want to get that. I
Yeah,
like that.
so
That's a t-shirt.
matter and energy will curve the fabric of space.
Okay.
And it's that curvature that tells other matter how to move in the curvature of space itself. And so Einstein juxtaposed those in a poetic phrase where he said, matter tells space how to curve. Space tell. Did I get that right? Yes. Matter. Space tell. Did I get that right? Yes. Matter.
I wouldn't
Matter
know.
tells space how to curve. Space tells matter how to move. It's beautiful.
That is beautiful.
It is beautiful. It is beautiful.
It sounds like the opening to a dance lesson. And we begin.
So.
In 1936, an unidentified flying object crashed in Germany's Black Forest. Wingless, disc-like, and stronger than any man-made competition, it confounded all scientific analysis. Elite physicists from the SS Technical Branch were tasked with recreating the mystery aircraft. In 1939, the Haunebu disc was born. The Thule Society was rumored to have a secret base in the Antarctic, and this is where the Haunebu disk was developed. Surprisingly, this notion isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. It was rumored that these capabilities were guided by higher knowledge supplied by ancient aliens. Contemporary media reports suggested that the aliens were working with the Nazis at the base, building liquid propellant rockets, anti-gravity disks, and stealth aircraft. With supersonic capabilities, the Haunebu was the world's first flying saucer. Jan van Helsing writes that scientists used psychic information from the Thule Society to create an aircraft that could travel at speeds of up to 12,000 kilometers an hour. During the Second World War, Air Force pilots spotted unidentified flying objects on numerous occasions. Reports described them as spinning balls of fire that followed fighter jets but never attacked. British Royal Air Force veteran Andrew Amrose wrote that when tracked, these aircraft would radically change speed or disappear, making them impossible to follow. Allied pilots called them Foo Fighters.
So how does it work? Well, it's similar to how a magnet falling through a pipe is slowed down. Anytime a conductor experiences a changing magnetic field, electric currents are induced in it which create a magnetic field to oppose that change. And in this case, the spinning magnets induce currents in the copper sheet. They create a magnetic field which is nearly a mirror image of the spinning magnets, and so they're repelled. If the rotors spin fast enough, this repulsion leads to levitation.
That is awesome.
Alright, let's set it down again.
Yep.
So it's just going to come gently land.
The induced currents then encounter resistance in the copper, so they dissipate their energy as heat.
Yeah.
I experienced this before with another electromagnetic levitation device. Except with this one, the changing magnetic field was created by an electromagnet in the base, inducing currents in a light aluminum plate, which levitated.
Whoa!
The plate got so hot, you could boil water on it.
Check out how hot this plate is. If you have two north magnets facing each other,
Yeah.
they normally just kind of like fall off.
Yeah.
Is there a similar problem here or no?
Not really, no. And the reason is the magnetic fields that are induced by currents in the copper sheet are a mirror image of the applied magnetic field, and the effect is so quick that as it moves, it just kind of follows it around.
Making this device work in practice is harder than it looks. For one thing, the magnetic field of the permanent magnets has to be very strong. Neodymium magnets are strong, but there's a special configuration you can use to make them even stronger.
It's called a Hallbach array. They're used in particle accelerators. They're used in fridge magnets, actually. Hallbach arrays, so they're stronger on the side that sticks to the fridge, so you use less material overall.
Magnetic field lines run from north to south, and they're normally symmetric on both sides of a magnet. But if you rearrange them like this, the magnetic field lines are channeled almost entirely into one side of the magnetic array, and they cancel out on the other side. This configuration produces a much stronger magnetic field without changing the properties of the magnets. In these rotors, there are 12 wedge-shaped magnets. Their magnetic poles are fixed in this particular arrangement. This increases the magnetic field on the bottom side and almost eliminates it on the top. As the magnets spin, they create a rotating magnetic field in the copper beneath them. This induces currents that create magnetic fields, which oppose the magnetic field of the spinning magnets above. The result is a repulsive force that is effectively lift for this quadcopter. But in addition to lift, there is also drag. Energy is clearly being dissipated in the system as the heat produced by the induced currents in the copper. And that energy comes from the fact the magnetic field of the induced currents is not a perfect mirror of the spinning magnets above. Instead, the induced magnetic poles are slightly ahead. So they produce a backward force on the rotors, which is really a backwards torque. And that's why the rotors on alternate corners have to spin in opposite directions. Because otherwise they would produce a net spin and turn the whole machine in one direction.
In that piece of carbon fiber, I've placed 6 little neodymium N53 strength, which is essentially the strongest magnets, and they're each placed with opposing poles. So you have north, south, north, south, north, south. What happens is when this spins right above the plate, it actually will levitate. It'll actually levitate about this far.
A lot of people are doing nothing more than getting huge quantities of mass and see if they can get a gravity wave to cause things to move. Well, that isn't what we're talking about at all. So I wondered if gravity could be related to its cousin magnetism. And so I found that when I take two magnets together, I have some neodymiums around here that I'm actually afraid of.
They're so strong.
They can danger you. But anyhow, you take a magnet, you go to put them together and they go clunk, right? But you take one of them, move it around, and all of a sudden it doesn't want to go together.
The repulsive.
So I got I ordered one at $5,000 a piece, with a 1/4-inch hole through between both of them, and I put a brass bolt and I tightened them down, forcing them together. And then I put them together in a thing that looks kind of like a rock. Okay, and then I got another one that didn't have magnets in it. And Galileo, in all his endeavors, he went up to the Leaning Tower of Pisa
And dropped the...
and he dropped a big rock and a small rock. And his buddy down the bottom kept telling him that the large rock and the small rock arrived at the same time. Well, I went up to in the Lockheed Building 501 by the side of escalators and elevators.
Oh, wow.
And I got 9 guys that were not educated and didn't have pre opinions on anything, and I dropped my 2 rocks, and I said, what I would like you to do is, I told them what I'd like you to do is I would like you to take whichever one arrives first, get it in your hand, and when I come down the elevator, hand it to me. Now they looked identical, except for
and nobody knew what was inside.
Not, absolutely not. All the 9 times that I tested it, it's as though the one with the opposing magnet field extending out 3 feet on each side. I actually measured how
big the field is.
How big the field was, and on each side of one rock, I had a total of 6 feet. At any rate, the other rock arrived first.
Which one arrived first?
The one that had no magnetic field in it.
So you were able to cancel out gravity to a certain degree. You were able to cancel,
precisely,
reduce the mass gravity effect.
Precisely.
By opposing fields.
Isn't that nice? You bet. And got 9 signatures and I always skip.
You did that at Lockheed. What year was this?
Oh, at least 8 years ago.
This is the actual document of Boyd's where he proved that by altering the field in a falling body, the magnetic field, it reduced its mass gravity equivalent and canceled out the effects of gravity to a certain percentage. And he did a building 500 drop test conducted from a height of 59 feet. The location is in White Solomon, Texas, and the time was 12:20 p.m. and this was in 1995, December 12th. Nobody knows this.
I know it.
So gravity, mass gravity is not, you can alter it.
Well, gravity within itself has to have, gravity goes through anything that is solid and anything like iron or anything else. But it has to have a magnetic component, which may be canceling out within itself. But as soon as it got around my rock, it all of a sudden recognized the presence.
How would you define gravity? Could you describe in layman's terms its basic principles for us?
Gravity is something difficult to explain because it's something that we essentially don't understand. It's just something that we can observe. Not much is really known about gravity. There are many theories about it, but they are just mainly theories. There's theories of gravitons, which allege that these subatomic particles.
Say, kids, what time is it? Pump up the volume.
Beat on the drums.
When the drum beats go like this.
Pump up the bass! How low can you go?
Turn up the music.
Turn it up! A little higher, just like that. Yes, the rhythm, the rebel. Just like that. Yeah, just like that. Yeah, boy. Just like that.
It's
time's up.
which allege that there these subatomic particles that act like an attractive force like gravity that exchange between two pieces of matter. There is also a theory that gravity is a form of wave, an electromagnetic wave. Basically, gravity is a force. It's the inherent property of matter to have gravity, a mutual attraction for each other. Modern science, current science right now, identifies one gravity. It's one force in nature. Apparently, through research at S4 or information gained from one of the crafts they were researching there, it appears that there are two different forms of gravity. One form works on an atomic scale, on subatomic particles, holding pieces of matter, holding atoms themselves together. Another works on a larger scale, the scale we're most familiar with, holding planets in orbit, holding ourselves to the ground, things of that sort. Because it produces a gravitational field, I wouldn't say the craft is invisible during the day. However, if you're under the craft, because of the way the gravity is being used, gravity bends time and space, and it bends light. If you are looking underneath the craft or from certain vantage points, you will actually see what's above the craft. It's really a trick of the way light bends under the influence of gravity. For instance, we can see stars that are behind the sun, that are blocked from our view by the sun. The reason we can see them is because the sun is a tremendous gravitational field and it's bending the light around it where we can see the star. Space-time and gravity are all essentially interrelated. They all act on one another. Gravity bends space. Gravity also distorts time. When you vary one, you essentially vary the other two. As an example, if you have a massive body, say a planet or something that's making a lot of gravity, producing a lot of gravitational waves, if you will, it distorts space. It bends space to it. It also slows down time. These things aren't theories.
Hello everyone, this is Samuel Mars, and today I would like to talk about Alex Jokorkov, a guy from Russia who came out with a gravity device invention, and he went viral here on YouTube and a couple of websites that I know. And as for the translation, I try my best, so I hope it's understandable. So let's jump and take a look.
Потому что мне приходится долго возиться с настройками, приходится где-то узнать полчаса или минут 40, так где-то возиться, настраивать параметры, и получится немножко затянуто. А вот саму посадку ее просто отключить один из блоков, и все, сразу идет завал параметров, и схема начинает уже работать не так, как надо, и диск падает. Ну, он шлепнется с большой высоты, так что придется пожертвовать схемой. Сама она, как видите, у меня не очень-то надежна. Удалось мне достать вот этот металл, единственное, что, который дает вот этот левитирующий эффект. Как обратите внимание, у него структура, как у подкрылки жуков, да? И при вращении он создает такой вот резонанс поля, который создает этот эффект раздвигания эфира. Ну ладно, посмотрим, что из этого будет. Итак, я пошел настраивать диски. И второй эксперимент по левитации диска начинается. Ну вот, запустился. Ну что, маленькая, но победа. Осталось только решить проблему стабилизации полета и горизонтальный полет. И все. И можно уже будет летать. Ну, если к тому времени меня YouTube не грохнет.
This will be the third video in the Grebennikov video replication series. Today we're going to try to get one of these shells to hover over the other one. The original of this video is what inspired me to do this series. So I hope you like it. Let's get started.
Упала. Начинается опять. Выше не поднимается. Странно. Нижняя на крылья тоже начинает ездить.
we got a company received a company bulletin, just as all these companies send out usually a monthly newsletter or something. I got one from RCA headquarters, and it said that they had, one of their experimenters had an object he was flying around that had an anti-gravity drive. In other words, it was self-levitating and could be moved around. And I thought, well, why are we doing this? Why are we messing with all these rockets when we could do this? So I called up headquarters, and first they said, well, it's not true. The experiment didn't really work. And then they said the document didn't even exist. And I said, well, I got it right in my hands here. And I already knew that Nikola Tesla had flown a platform around in the very early 1900s, like 1904. I don't believe that we've gone backwards in technology, and the Russians grabbed everything they could of that technology. And I assume that our government grabbed some of it or all of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you can levitate an iceberg, you could end a drought. I mean, you could land in a dry lake bed. You could change architecture.
The work that Hutchins has been doing, he has Tesla coils, he has Van de Graaff, and he has, very frankly, static electricity generators. Notice that data doesn't have to make sense.
Right.
Data just has to be truthful.
The truth.
That's right.
It's more important than proving Einstein right or wrong.
Okay, now his data showed everything from a chocolate milkshake snaking toward the top of his room to bowling balls floating in the air.
Very little effort required, about as much as lifting an umbrella, and no centrifugal force. Now, of course, we have the problem of stopping it.
Nikola Tesla was a great inventor and a great humanitarian. Well, Tesla wanted to get into his field, which was free, if you will, energy that comes from the surroundings. He was hired by J.P. Morgan to work with Westinghouse and Edison companies on the East Coast. And Tesla said, I've got it made. I think we can now transmit electrical power through the Earth, through the ionosphere, without any wires or telephone poles. If you gave a device, like a free energy device, a generator that would service all their needs in their home for free, they could then bring out their creative talents, which they were born with and been suppressed because they've had to toil for a living. They could be tremendous artists beyond our dreams, tremendous engineers beyond our dreams. J.P. Morgan was not buying it. He said, no, we're going to have to tear this stuff down. So Tesla kind of pulled back into himself and decided, well, I guess it's not time for this.
He took a whole bunch of these bug wings and he glued them to like a Venetia blind structure, and he put it into a little platform he built. So they were all, these bug wings were all covered in here. And he used I theorize he used the wing covers as well as the inner wing itself. There's also a kind of a handlebar on this thing with some controls. You can see the thing a little better here in detail. The controls, I think, had to be manipulated continuously and probably vibrated to create the same action that the bug was doing. There was also down at the base some kind of a lever, which I suspect controlled the amount of lift he was getting out of this thing. Anyway, Grebennikov claimed that he could fly this thing or levitate it, and it would go around at almost 1,000 miles an hour. Now you ask, how can that happen? Well, he said that there was an energy field that built up around this thing due to this gravity field building up in the platform, and by this thing building up, it built out a force field that basically surrounded him and protected him from the local environment. So even though he was flying at 1,000 miles an hour, you could go, you could be wearing your Sunday best suit and not get it flutter a bit at 1,000 miles an hour. But if you get into the other things that he did with shape, they almost mirror the stuff that I discovered. And it proves, I guess, that there's either two crazy people in the world or there's two people that have found the same discoveries.
Has anybody ever threatened your life? I mean, as far as like trying to possess what you have here, I mean, seeing it as a threat, has anyone ever threatened you and said that, you're on to something and you're not allowed to be doing this? And
No major threats. Mostly people saying, well, you should work for the U.S. government. That's a lot of emails I get are like that, and that they're ready and willing to stand by and give the funding out.
Einstein's work is only a slight modification of Newton's work. But we do understand that Newton's work has, well, Newton's work, for example, Newton says,
this is mind-blowing.
Says anything that's in motion tends to remain in motion, right? Okay, so I have something, and I'm taking it around counterclockwise. And see, and what Newton said is true. He just wants to go around, 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 around. This particular thing is called a cell. It is not, it's clear plastic, there's nothing in it. Okay, now I'm going to take it around clockwise. It says, no, I don't want to do that. It's just like my children. I will do it my own way.
How did it go the other way?
Precisely. A Newton's law.
Is that because of the rotation of the planet, or?
Well, there
Can I try that?
You may. A Newton's law.
Is that because of the rotation of the planet, or?
Well,
Can I try that?
You may. In fact, first of all, send it around counterclockwise.
Okay. And this is called a cell?
It is celt, C-E-L-T.
What's in it? Okay, there we go.
Nothing's in it. It's plastic. Okay, now take it around clockwise.
Okay.
And it says no, and it goes back to the same number of turns you sent.
Oh, I've never seen anything like that.
Now go out stronger. I know. See, I'm looking for the exception to the rule. You have to, if you can use language, you really need to convert it into mathematics.
But here's one thing, this makes sense to me. If you can cancel out gravity in a falling body, and you can even reduce a percentage of the effects of gravity for aircraft, it would take less fuel, they would be more efficient, and they could hover with less energy, and that much I can figure out.
And the atmospheric edge of the Earth will be meaningless.
If you can cancel out gravity in a falling body, and you can even reduce a percentage of the effects of gravity for aircraft, it would take less fuel, they would be more efficient, and they could hover with less energy, and that much I can figure out.
And the atmospheric edge of the Earth will be meaningless.
I think the realm of it is quite probable, since I was studying some of the older experiments done by T. Brown, Podleinoff, and those folks. And what's interesting about Podleinoff is that the anti-gravity effects seem to go right down the Earth all the way up to an unknown area.
Tesla said, they're not interested in my time. I want you to take everything I can teach you and go in your time and see if they'll listen to you. And if you don't make it, you're going to have to pass it on, because at the rate we're going, we're on a self-destructive course. Carr said, I will, and he got his own lab started and started really getting into a lot of free energy devices and building them.
So he built a spaceship?
He's building small spaceships and he had different sizes, different models. There's a company, Advanced Kinetics, in Costa Mesa. That's where we were living, in Costa Mesa, California. And they're looking for a research and development laboratory technician. They gave me a job, they put me in the research lab, and I was inventing ideas all day long. I just loved it, because I like to invent simple ways of doing hard things. We could talk about things that were unlimited, not limited. I said, my mission is to see that we have habitation and transportation in one vehicle. And he said, well, you sound like a guy that's back east getting in trouble right now. His name is Otis Carr. And he put in a patent for a levitation device, and they wouldn't give him the patent. He said, you got to pull that levitation out and anchor it on the ground, and we'll give you a patent on an amusement device. You cannot use levitation. Day and night, 24/7, we were building these small prototypes. And they would range anywhere from 12 inches to 3 feet to 6 feet, to, you know, in size.
And they actually flew, they actually levitated.
Oh, yeah.
And what was the source of the power?
Well, it was magnetic in nature. And
you were actually building these for people to sit in. I mean, not just models.
These were prototypes just to prove what we wanted, and then graduate up to where human habitation could get on board and operate them. In those days, we had counter-rotating wheels, one going clockwise and another going counterclockwise. We had a capacitor, we had small magnets, and we had what's called a Utron. It was a double tetrahedron. That's 2 ice cream cones put with the open ends together. But you have a diamond shape. And we had 12 of them around the periphery of the craft. And we had magnets, horseshoe magnets, 12 of those around the craft. So when you started rotating and counter-rotating, as these Utrons went through the field, they would act as a generator and a capacitor in themselves, and they would generate a lot of power, not necessarily electrical power, but vibrational power. When you get to the resonant frequency of your surroundings, it cancels everything out. It goes to a 0 point. And once you've reached 0 point, then you can go anywhere you want.
So I wondered if gravity could be related to its cousin magnetism.
Mm-hmm.
So I wondered if gravity could be related to its cousin magnetism.
Mm-hmm.
Magnetic field in it.
So you were able to cancel out gravity to a certain degree. You
How
were
do you
able
like
to
that?
cancel,
Precisely.
reduce the mass gravity effect.
Precisely. Nature never uses English. It doesn't speak. It doesn't speak any language. But yet it's talking to us all the time.
Right.
And the key thing is to identify what it's saying.
So the fact that such materials exhibit strong diamagnetism means that we would generate very strong forces that can work against gravity. For instance, you can have a bearing that is both frictionless and contactless. These strong forces can even be utilized for fast ground transportation of trains. In fact, superconducting trains can travel with high speeds without any contact with the ground. That is, the trains can be levitated above the ground.
nothing in the sky at all. Then all of a sudden, bam, what is that? Anybody tell me what that is? We're in the middle of the ocean on a ferry. Nothing around. Look, nothing around. No land, no nothing.
ADIFO, all directions flying object. ADIFO is a VTOL aircraft able to fly in all directions, having the same aerodynamic characteristics. The aircraft has a unique configuration, has a circular shape, and the fuselage is also the wing. The aerodynamic body is axial symmetric and is obtained by rotating a bidirectional dolphin airfoil around the axis perpendicular on the middle of the chord line. Unique aerodynamic features. An ADIFO platform was tested at low speeds in the wind tunnel, providing high lift-drag ratio as well as wide range of useful incidence angles, even over 60 degrees. The aerodynamic center is located near the middle of the chord line, near the body gravity center respectively. The aerodynamic load is distributed relatively evenly along the body surface and has no stagnation point. During the transonic flight, the body does not generate any shock wave on the surface and no sonic boom is generated. There are low vibrations, low aerodynamic noise and low heating at high speeds. In the transonic flight, the drag is drastically reduced compared to the existing airfoils, which ensures very high fuel efficiency at transonic and supersonic speeds. Moreover, the center of pressure remains close to the center of symmetry, meaning no jump of pitching moment and insignificant roll and yaw moments. Also, there are no lift fluctuations. Conclusion: smooth transition from subsonic to supersonic flight. The hypermaneuverability concept. ADIFO is a VTOL aircraft that uses a quadcopter configuration with ducted fans for takeoff and landing. A simple, reliable and affordable technology. At low speeds, the aircraft can maneuver using the lift ducted fans like a normal quad. For cruise propulsion, it uses jet engines having two rear-vectored nozzles. The vectored nozzles are used to obtain yaw, pitch and roll maneuvers. To do special maneuvers at high speeds, the aircraft can use lateral nozzles. So the aircraft can do sudden lateral translation or sudden yaw. The rear-vectored nozzles, the vertical ducted fans and the lateral nozzles can be used simultaneously combined, obtaining unique maneuvers superior to any known aircraft. For aerodynamic reasons, at very high speeds the vertical ducted fans can be covered, and the maneuvering role is taken over by vertical nozzles. All the lateral and vertical nozzles are working in a similar way to a reaction control system for a spacecraft. Reversing the main propulsion jet, the aircraft can stop suddenly in the air, maintaining altitude. The aircraft can fly upside down at high speeds, but also at low speeds by reversing the ducted fans jet. These are only few examples of maneuvers. In reality, the only limit of maneuverability is the pilot's imagination. This is hypermaneuverability. A DIFO can be used as a private aircraft because it's cheap, easy to build and easy to fly. Ideally, the ADIFO can be used as a UAV, UCAV, or even fighter aircraft. Due to its VTOL capabilities, hypermaneuverability, speed, and very low radar signature. Due to its disc shape, a DIFO can be used as a suborbital vehicle, is ideal for multiple boost glide on the stratosphere, and it's also ideally shaped for re-entry in the atmosphere.
One of the things that really stood out in Brad's mind was that he said that these vehicles were capable of light speed or better.
So, according to his account, on November 12, 1988, Mark's friend inadvertently gained access to a highly classified airshow where the featured hardware of the event was real flying saucers. They were really strange looking, but appeared functional and were named to suggest anti-gravity and reverse-engineered alien technology. An official presence stated they could travel faster than light. Despite their futuristic performance capabilities, these appeared to be stripped-down, road-worn working prototypes, which had seen practical operation for years. If this were the case, they were crude but tangible proof of concept for a staggering leap in aviation technology. They used extremely advanced electromagnetic or field propulsion, electromagnetic or field propulsion, electromagnetic or field propulsion, electromagnetic or field propulsion, as opposed to solid or jet fuel, nuclear power, or any other commonly known conventional means. It also meant our government and at least one other major defense contractor, Lockheed Martin, had been developing and deploying functional systems along these lines for many years.
And he just sat down, and right where we were sitting there at his table, he just kind of sketched out with an ink pen on a piece of legal-size white paper, and put some some little handwritten call-outs around the edges that described the number of capacitor plates in each one of the little sections, that there were they were so wide at the end, and the crew compartment was definitely about 12 feet in diameter. Just kind of put all these things down as close as he could remember to the way they existed.
This was called the flux liner.
This is probably the strangest one you've shown me yet. This actually flies?
It actually flies on the principles of high voltage electrical charges.
Alicia Davison described being escorted into the engine room and seeing the propulsion system components. And it involved a central column that was made of a transparent glass-like material. And she said there was a silvery fluid that was spiraling upward at the bottom of this column. Down in kind of this well that was in the center of the spacecraft was this little tiny flywheel-like mechanism spinning, which matched the ARV also. And this is at a point when this young lady had never seen any of the drawings that I'd done of what the ARV was structured like. I was just talking about propulsion components in general. But then she said that when you looked across this little well, this lowered floor area in the center of the room, was like a guardrail around it. She stood there. You could look across, and she said it looked like the below the deck she was standing on was this glass-like material with these coils of wire going through it. And they were spaced out in the same proportions as the ones on the ARV. The thing that she said that was most significant was that the column itself was rotating in one direction, and the flywheel was spinning in the opposite direction. There was counter-rotation, which is something that's often been reported in UFO sightings. You see components on the craft that are spinning in opposite directions.
Back here on Earth, the scientific community has been busy since the end of the Industrial Revolution. There have been dozens, perhaps hundreds of US and international patents dealing directly with electrokinetics and electrogravitics, going back to the turn of the last century. It would be safe to assume private industry and the military have also been working on a great deal of related applications off the public record. In short, since Nikola Tesla's first experiments with pushing electricity around, mankind has had a thing for anti-gravity.
You know, I find it really remarkable that there's so much similarity between the two objects.
Mm-hmm. And when is that patent from?
May 30th, 1967. It's called a magneto-hydrodynamic propulsion apparatus. And so I started thinking, well, maybe it's like a cyclotron. Maybe there's an electrical discharge from this. Basically, this whole thing looks like a giant Tesla coil. It's got the capacitor array. It's got, you know, a central column that looks like the secondary windings of a Tesla coil. And this might even go back to something that Nikola Tesla discovered back in the 1940s. And, you know, it just was all hushed up. And all the UFO sightings we've ever seen were something that came from Nikola Tesla and not from another planet.
The ARV system, for all of its claims of flashy, out-of-this-world propulsion capabilities, was indeed remarkably simple. It could be described as a large-scale, souped-up Tesla coil, designed to negate gravity and inertia, with off-the-shelf navigation and life support systems bolted on, almost as an afterthought. You could think of it as the Model T of anti-gravity vehicles, an industrial dune buggy, or crude hot rod that can get you to Mars in a few minutes. In this version at least, first-class seating was still a way off.
There's a large capacitor array. Through the middle of the crew compartment is a central column that's called the amplifier section that's in the middle of the craft. On the very center point of that column is what looks like a large 9-foot diameter flywheel type mechanism. Then around the belt line of the crew compartment is about a 2-foot wide coil of wire that's embedded in the same glass-like material that the capacitor section plates are embedded in. The ejection seats are mounted back to back. There's 4 of them in the smallest version of the craft, and they're mounted on this central column on a set of rails. A bowl that moves around and can be, you know, used to convey the commands of the pilot in terms of what he wants to do in terms of shaping the field around the vehicle. And right in the center of that bowl is a kind of laser diode. This aircraft was using extremely high voltages, and the voltages would ionize the air around the vehicle so much that it would start producing X-ray photons, which are absolutely lethal. So you have to have basically a barrier to protect yourself. With a little air-driven claw that's on the end of it. In fact, I think that the craft's magnetic field or electromagnetic field is probably so powerful that conventional little electric motors probably wouldn't work. The electrostatic field created by this huge capacitor array and the ionization that occurs just because of the propulsion system might be enough to create a level of ionization around the craft that's high enough that it would produce X-ray photons of its own accord. And so you would want to be able to protect the pilot and the crew members from that radiation. So anyway, that's the general overview of the structure of the vehicle. This is a vehicle that has the ability to travel up to or beyond the speed of light. And part of the reason that it's able to do that is because it exploits the energy form that's embedded in space-time that's responsible for the effects of mass and inertia.
So here we have a configuration of various components, creating a system that's somehow capable of producing and maintaining an insane amount of energy in a concentrated field around the vehicle. This field can be precisely controlled by the pilot with the aid of a basic throttle, an alien steering ball, and a bunch of casino cameras. There's plenty of onboard oxygen, handy if you're off the planet, and a lead coating so the occupants don't get fried in their seats, and a robot arm, in case you need a robot arm somewhere. It looks like a big clumsy diving bell from 1905, but apparently works like a helicopter you can take past light speed. Its beauty and elegance lie in the propulsion system, maybe a really fast one that gets around currently accepted physics, one we commonly associate with UFOs.
For anybody who has followed the work of Einstein or just basic physics, one of the sort of inviolable rules of physics is that there's no material object that can actually go faster than the speed of light. So somehow or other, and I'm not saying we got this from aliens, but they did call it the alien reproduction theory, but somehow or other, this simple system that Brad described, these diagrams, was able to do this.
To our character as a nation, but also our economy and our great nation.
In the middle of last century, physicists made an astounding discovery, and that is what we ordinarily consider empty space isn't empty at all.
powering vast
Even if you go to the
universes,
far
storing
reaches
incredible
of outer
technology,
space, it turns out
and
that
providing
rather than emptiness, what we call the
security we need
vacuum
to protect the
is
American
really
people
a
and
seething
civilians
cauldron
with a very
of what we call quantum
big
energy,
factor with respect
or
to
zero-point
space
energy.
and space
Zero point just simply means that even if you froze the entire universe down to absolute zero, froze out all motion, where everything would be as quiet as you could possibly get it, this energy is still there. It was predicted by the mathematics of quantum theory, but the numbers were so large. For example, there's enough energy in the volume of a coffee cup to evaporate the world's oceans. It was thought, well, this must be some kind of artifact of the theory. But as time went on, various predictions in quantum theory were verified in the laboratory, and it finally turned out we had to take these numbers seriously.
The National Security Advisor, NASA, and the Director of National Intelligence. The Council will also draw the expertise of other White House offices as well as insights from scientists.
Greetings, and welcome to the laboratories of Only One Egg Productions, where today I would like to introduce to you lifter technology. Originally developed by T. Townsend Brown between the 1930s and 1960s, it has become more recently popularized thanks to the efforts of Jean-Louis Nadin of France, who has been sharing his own experiments freely over the internet, which is how I found out about these. Now, a lifter is basically constructed out of a little bit of balsa wood, tin foil, and a length of very fine wire, which, after being charged with 20,000 or more volts, will rise up off the desktop and hover silently to the amazement of family and friends. Now, how is this feat accomplished? Well, to begin with, I have this wonderful Glassman high voltage power supply, which I purchased off eBay for a small fraction of its original cost. From there, the electricity travels down these wires, across the gantry, and down to the lifter, where it is emitted through this very fine gauge wire across a 3-centimeter air gap, down to a collector foil skirt, and then back out the wires into the power supply. Now, let's fire this thing up and see what happens. Slowly applying the high voltage power until we achieve, as the saying goes, Eureka! We have liftoff. Now, we are currently running at about 23 kilovolts and about half a milliamp, which may not sound too much, but I assure you, if you were to inadvertently stick your fingers in this circuit, it hurts like hell. So if you do these experiments at home, please be extremely careful. Now, the theory behind this is that you have, the very fine wire above and the much larger skirt below. The wire above, being much smaller, has a far more densely packed field of ions or electrons than the comparatively much more diffuse cloud around the tinfoil skirt. This asymmetry creates what was termed by Townsend Brown as an electrogravitic effect, essentially causing the lifter to fall toward the wire, or in this case, fall up to the wire. Now, we are not creating anti-gravity, we are not negating gravity, we have simply created a gravitational well, or depression, or perhaps called a gravitational low pressure zone, into which the lifter falls into. There are a number of lifter naysayers who suggest this is purely an ion wind effect and nothing more than an electric kite. If that were the case, you would expect, should I reverse the polarity on these wires, that the lifter would basically then just drive itself into the desktop. I'll tell you what, give me a moment, I'll reverse the polarity on these wires, and we'll see what happens. Hold on a moment. Welcome back. Well, I've just reversed the polarity on the wires, so let's fire this thing up again and see what happens. Turning on the power supply, slowly increasing the power until we get liftoff. Now, if this was simply ion wind, again, you would think this thing would simply drive itself into the tabletop, but clearly it doesn't. So there must be something else going on here, perhaps what Townsend Brown called the electrogravitic effect. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the demonstration, and do tune back for future demonstrations of lifter technology. Thank you.
Loud and clear. 7, go ahead. I'm talking at 10 o'clock high. This is Houston. Say again, 7. I'm talking at 10 o'clock high.
An object which is in the same place all the time and appears to be tumbling. Well, we've had it ever since yesterday. It just seems to be tagging along with us.